In a previous conversation we've had, I've made the point that if the Clean Power Plant rule raises energy cost, that will put our economy at an economic disadvantage relative to countries overseas, which frankly will continue to pollute or emit carbon. Now, we wanted to test this hypothesis, so we took all the states in the United States and we looked at those which have the easiest compliance with the Clean Power Plant rule, i.e. they currently emit the less, and those states are going to have the hardest time. They emit the most. And it turns out there is kind of an inverse correlation with electricity cost. So if you look at RGGI states, for example, the Northeast, they have electricity costs that are 3 times higher than that for a state like Montana. Mm-hmm. Now, I think I remember you saying, no, it's possible to lower emissions without raising the cost, but I'll just say at baseline, these states which have the lowest emissions of carbon already have triple the cost of their electricity. Now, if we're going to have an input cost, and it's going to be energy, intuitively, if you raise that input cost, you're going to have some industry that will move to an area of the world with a lower input cost. As an aside, we had a question to a group, and we asked what nation has successfully grown their economy and lowered their emissions. They pointed out 6, all of which have deindustrialized. My point being that we've deindustrialized. It doesn't mean the industry is not there. They've just moved to a country where they can emit as much as they wish, plus release other pollutants. So on net, on a global issue, we're worse off. Now, I have a sense you're not going to agree with what I just said, but I would like your thoughts on that.
Well, it's just one way to look at it, but you know, I have kind of intimate knowledge about the Northeast and why the energy costs are higher because I live there. And the one thing I think you need to consider is if those states are such high cost and they're taking action on climate, they're either incredibly dedicated to greenhouse gas reductions or they find value in taking those actions. And if you look at RGGI in the revenues that it has produced has been a significant benefit to those communities because it invested in energy efficiency and it resulted in lower cost. So now, there's 2 ways to reduce.
May I interrupt just for a second?
Well,
the analysis I read was that probably the lower costs were more of a product of substitution of low-cost natural gas than it was for the quote-unquote investment.
If you look at it, they've done studies, and I know that RGGI has done a study on how much it actually reduced cost. So I just want you to think about that. I don't think the direct relationship, as you've outlined it, is the most productive way to look at it, or the one that best reflects the facts on the ground. Empirically,
though, it is true. Those states that emit the most carbon have the lowest energy cost. Those that emit the least have the highest. In some cases triple, and if your cost of energy is an input into your cost of production, intuitively companies are going to move where that cost is lower. I guess I'm not disagreeing with the facts that you've outlined them just there. My disagreement may be with what would the impact of regulating greenhouse gas emissions have. And if RGGI is moving forward even when they're not required to, and they're saying it's building a clean energy economy and jobs and lowering their cost, then maybe there is an inverse relationship about the ability of climate action to actually benefit every state. And I would argue that if you do it well and let states design it as we've done with the Clean Power Plan, they're smart enough to understand the economics, and we will be able to make that work. I wish we could continue, but we're way over, and I yield back.
Thank you.